Soap kills bacteria. You know this, I know this, your mother told you, your doctor told you, the advertisements told you. You lather up, you scrub for 20 seconds, and the bacteria die. Clean hands, safe hands, simple as that. Every hospital, every kitchen, every bathroom in the civilized world operates on this principle. Soap is a killer. That's completely wrong, and I can prove it. Plain soap, the ordinary bar sitting on the edge of your sink, has no ability whatsoever to kill bacteria. None, zero bactericidal action. If you took a thriving colony of bacteria, say E. coli or Staphylococcus, and you dunked them in a solution of ordinary hand soap, you know what would happen? They'd survive, they'd be perfectly happy, floating around alive and well, surrounded by soap. You haven't killed a thing. And yet, hand washing with soap is one of the most powerful medical interventions in human history. More powerful than most drugs, more lives saved than most surgeries. In the 1840s, a Hungarian physician named Ignaz Semmelweis noticed something terrible. Women were dying of childbed fever in the maternity ward at alarming rates. But only in one ward, the one staffed by doctors and medical students. The other ward, staffed by midwives, had much lower death rates. The difference, the doctors were coming straight from performing autopsies on cadavers, reaching their unwashed hands into living women. Semmelweis introduced a policy of hand washing with a chlorinated lime solution between the morgue and the delivery room. The death rate plummeted. He was ridiculed. Colleagues called him insulting, and his ideas unscientific. He died in an asylum. But he was right. Hand washing with soap works spectacularly well. The data on this is overwhelming. Washing with soap and water for just 30 seconds removes roughly 99.9% of the pathogens on your hands. 30 seconds. So we have a contradiction. A beautiful, wonderful contradiction. Soap doesn't kill bacteria, but it eliminates them almost completely from your hands. How can both of those things be true? Well, this is exactly the kind of puzzle I love, because the answer turns out to involve some very elegant physics. Not chemistry, not biology. Physics. And it all starts with a glass of water. Look at a glass of water sitting on your table. It looks calm, still, boring. But if you could shrink down and stand on the surface of that water, you'd feel something remarkable. You'd feel tension, an actual physical force pulling you inward, pulling you down toward the bulk of the liquid. The surface of the water is under stress. Why? Because every water molecule in the interior of that glass is surrounded by other water molecules on all sides. Up, down, left, right. And water molecules are sticky. They grab onto each other through what we call hydrogen bonds. The oxygen atom in a water molecule is slightly negative, and the hydrogen atoms are slightly positive, so each molecule acts like a tiny bar magnet. Each one can form up to 4 of these bonds with its neighbors, so a molecule deep inside the glass is being pulled equally in every direction. The forces balance out. It's comfortable. It's happy. It doesn't want to go anywhere. But now consider a molecule sitting right at the surface. Below it and beside it there are other water molecules pulling on it with those same hydrogen bonds. But above it, air, nitrogen, oxygen, argon. And those gas molecules are barely interested. They don't offer any meaningful attraction. So that surface molecule gets yanked sideways and downward by its neighbors, but nothing pulls it up. There's a net inward force, a kind of molecular loneliness at the boundary. And when you add up all those imbalanced forces across the entire surface, molecule after molecule after molecule, you get something we call surface tension. The surface of the water behaves as if it's covered by an invisible elastic membrane. And I want to be very clear, that is not a metaphor. That is what it actually does. You can float a steel needle on water if you lay it down gently. You can float a paperclip. Water strider insects walk across ponds, supported entirely by this tension. If you overfill a glass very carefully, you can get the water to dome up above the rim, bulging upward, held in place by this invisible skin. Here's a way to feel this yourself. Next time you're at a sink, turn on the faucet to a very thin stream. The stream narrows as it falls, right? Gravity is pulling the water down, but surface tension is trying to minimize the surface area, squeezing the stream thinner. Everything water does, every shape it takes, is a negotiation between gravity and this cohesive force between its molecules. Water's surface tension is quite strong compared to most liquids, about 72 millinewtons per meter at room temperature. And this is important, so remember it. Water is clingy. Water holds on to itself with real conviction. And this is exactly why water by itself is a lousy cleaner. Think about what you're trying to do when you wash your hands. Your skin is covered in oils. Natural oils that your body produces, and bacteria love oil. They nestle into those oily films and cling to them. The oil is hydrophobic. It repels water. So when you run water over your dirty, oily, bacteria-covered hands, the water just rolls off. It beads up. The surface tension keeps the water molecules clinging to each other instead of spreading out and penetrating into those oily crevices where the bacteria are hiding. Water basically refuses to get involved. It's like trying to clean a greasy pan with just a stream of cold water. The grease laughs at you. So here comes soap, and I want you to understand soap not as some magical disinfectant, but as something far more interesting. A soap molecule is one of the most cleverly designed objects in all of chemistry, though I should say nature designed it, not us. We just learned to make it. A soap molecule has two ends, and the two ends have completely opposite personalities. One end is hydrophilic. It loves water, it's electrically charged, polar, and it desperately wants to be surrounded by water molecules. It would happily dissolve into the water and never come back. The other end is hydrophobic. It hates water. It's a long hydrocarbon chain, greasy by nature, and it wants nothing to do with water molecules. If it could run away from water, it would. You've got one molecule with a split personality. One half reaches for water, the other half runs from it. And this is the entire trick. This molecular tug-of-war is the physics that makes soap work. When you introduce soap molecules into water, something dramatic happens to the surface tension. Those hydrophobic tails can't stand being in the water, so they scramble toward any available surface, including the water-air boundary. They wedge themselves into the surface, disrupting the nice orderly arrangement of water molecules. They break up those hydrogen bonds, and the surface tension drops. Dramatically, you go from about 72 millinewtons per meter down to maybe 25 or 30. The water suddenly loses its clingy, standoffish behavior. It spreads out. It can now penetrate into cracks and crevices. It wets surfaces that had previously rolled right off of. Just by adding soap, you fundamentally change the physics of water. But that's only half the story. Because the soap molecules don't just sit at the surface. Once there are enough of them, they start doing something extraordinary. They organize themselves into tiny spherical structures called micelles. In a micelle, all the hydrophobic tails point inward, hiding from the water in a little greasy core. And all the hydrophobic heads point outward, facing the surrounding water. It's a sphere with a water-loving shell and a grease-loving interior. Now picture what happens when those micelles encounter the oily film on your skin. The hydrophobic tails reach into the oil, they're attracted to it. They start pulling oil molecules away from the skin surface and trapping them inside the micelle core. The oil, along with everything embedded in it, including bacteria, gets encapsulated, surrounded, lifted off your skin, and suspended in the water. Think of it this way. Imagine a crowd of people with outstretched arms, and each person grabs a speck of mud off the floor and holds it up in the air, passing it hand over hand toward the door. That's essentially what micelles do. They wrap around the debris, carry it into suspension, and the flowing water sweeps the whole assembly away. Then you rinse, and the entire package, micelle plus trapped oil plus bacteria, washes down the drain. The bacteria aren't dead, they're alive, but they're gone, removed, physically transported off your body and into the plumbing. Soap is not a weapon, it's a vehicle. It's a very sophisticated molecular taxicab that picks up the passengers you don't want and drives them somewhere they can't bother you. This is why the duration of scrubbing matters so much. If you rinse your hands for 5 seconds, only a fraction of those micelles have had time to form, penetrate the oil layer, and encapsulate the debris. At 15 seconds, you've removed maybe 90% of the pathogens. At 30 seconds, 99.9%. The extra time isn't about killing, it's about physics. It's about giving the molecules enough time to do their mechanical work. Here's something beautiful that follows from this. If soap doesn't kill bacteria, then the concept of antibacterial soap is, for ordinary consumers, mostly meaningless. And in fact, this is exactly what the research shows. Study after study has found no additional health benefit from antibacterial soaps compared to plain soap in household settings. The Food and Drug Administration looked at 19 ingredients commonly used in antibacterial soaps, including triclosan, and concluded they were no more effective than regular soap and water. They pulled those products off the shelves because the soap itself was never the killing agent. The physics of removal was doing all the heavy lifting. Now, I want to tell you something that makes this story even more wonderful, because there is one class of organism that soap actually does destroy. Not bacteria, but certain viruses. Some viruses, the ones we call enveloped viruses, have a particular structure. Their genetic material, their RNA or DNA, is wrapped in a protein shell called a capsid. And surrounding that capsid is an outer coat made of lipids, fats, a lipid bilayer, stolen from the membrane of whatever host cell the virus last infected. This fatty envelope is what the virus uses to recognize and attach to new cells. Without it, the virus cannot infect you. And here is where the physics gets delicious. That lipid envelope is structurally very similar to the oily film on your skin. It's a greasy membrane. 2 layers of lipid molecules arranged tail to tail with their hydrophilic heads facing outward. Sound familiar? It's the same kind of structure the soap molecule was born to disrupt. When you lather up, the hydrophobic tails of the soap molecules encounter that viral lipid bilayer, and they do exactly what they always do. They wedge themselves in, they compete with the virus's own lipid molecules for space in the membrane. They shoulder their way between the neatly arranged fatty acid tails. And as more and more soap molecules insert themselves, the orderly arrangement collapses. Think of it like pushing extra people into a tightly packed elevator. At some point the walls give way, the envelope disintegrates. The spike proteins that the virus uses to latch onto your cells are ripped away, left floating uselessly in the soapy water. The virus falls apart into fragments, it becomes biologically inert. It cannot infect anything ever again. The virus isn't alive in the first place, technically, but now it is well and truly finished. So soap performs 2 completely different physical operations simultaneously. For bacteria, which have tough cell walls that soap cannot penetrate, it works by mechanical removal. Encapsulate, lift, rinse away. For enveloped viruses, it works by structural demolition. It rips apart the very architecture the virus depends on for survival. Same molecule, 2 mechanisms, both driven by that amphiphilic split personality, one end loving water and the other hating it. This distinction matters. There are viruses without lipid envelopes, the so-called non-enveloped viruses, like norovirus, poliovirus, rhinoviruses, and many of the viruses behind the common cold. These are tougher customers. Their outer shell is made of protein, not fat, and soap can't dissolve protein the same way it dissolves a lipid membrane. For these, the mechanical removal still works, the scrubbing and rinsing carries them away, but soap can't destroy them structurally the way it destroys influenza or coronaviruses. This is why, even with vigorous hand washing, some infections are stubbornly hard to prevent. And the physics tells you exactly why. It's not that hand washing fails. It's that the architecture of the pathogen determines which of soap's 2 mechanisms applies. Against a fatty envelope, soap is a demolition crew. Against a naked protein capsid, soap is merely a janitor. Still effective, but through a different channel entirely. And isn't that interesting? The same molecule, doing 2 fundamentally different jobs depending on what it encounters. The physics is the same in both cases. The amphiphilic tug-of-war between the hydrophilic head and the hydrophobic tail. But the consequences diverge because the targets have different structures. The laws of physics don't change. Only the context does. I find this whole story deeply satisfying. And I'll tell you why. We live in an era that worships complexity. We want our medicines to be sophisticated, our technologies to be clever, our solutions to be high-tech. And sometimes that's appropriate. But the single most impactful public health intervention in human history, the one thing that has prevented more disease and saved more lives than almost any drug, any vaccine, any surgical procedure, is a substance that was discovered by accident thousands of years ago, probably when animal fat dripped into wood ash near a river, and someone noticed the resulting paste made things clean. The ancient Babylonians were making soap around 2,800 years before the Common Era. They had no idea why it worked. They just knew that it did. And it works not because of some brilliant biochemical attack on bacteria, not because of some engineered molecule targeting a specific metabolic pathway. It works because of surface tension, because of the way molecules arrange themselves at interfaces, because of the simple, elegant, universal physics of attractions and repulsions between atoms. A soap molecule is just a little rod with a charged head and a greasy tail. That's all. No complex machinery. No metabolic pathways, no genetic targeting, just a molecule that doesn't quite fit in water and doesn't quite fit in oil, and in its restless attempt to find a comfortable position, it dismantles the defenses of the most dangerous pathogens on Earth. That restlessness, that inability to settle down is the engine of the whole thing. The molecule is perpetually uncomfortable, and that discomfort saves your life. There is something profoundly satisfying about that, if you'll forgive me for saying so. The deepest truths in physics are often like this. The simple rules underneath, the basic interactions, the forces between individual molecules, those are what matter. Everything else, the foaming, the cleaning, the saving of millions of human lives, all of it is consequences. Consequences of a molecule that can't make up its mind about water. Next time you wash your hands, watch the water change. Watch it go from beating up on your skin to spreading out in a smooth, thin film. That change, that moment when the surface tension drops, that's the physics happening right in front of you. You're not killing anything, you're rearranging the molecular geometry of water, and that rearrangement is powerful enough to protect you from a pandemic. So tell me something. When you wash your hands tonight, what will you be thinking about? I'd like to know.